Hi, I'm poet and writer Kate Spivey, and today I want to talk about poetry, specifically who the gatekeepers are when it comes to poetry. What do I mean by gatekeepers? Basically, who decides whether poetry gets published? Who decides whether it's popular? Who decides what makes a good or a bad poem? There's a couple different levels to this, so I kind of wanted to just generally discuss them with you today. The first level I want to talk about is the lofty level, like the big time gatekeepers who have been there for forever. And by for forever, I mean as long as kind of Western style universities have existed. These are academics, they're professors, they're literary magazine editors. They're the people who say this poem gets to live forever, this poem gets to get taught to other people, this poem is considered good, this poem is part of now the literary canon. And for a very, very long time throughout history, those were entirely old wealthy white men, which is why we have a lot of poems that are considered like classics that are written and loved by old wealthy white men. Now, it doesn't mean that all of those poems aren't actually objectively good. It means that not all of them are better than their contemporaries. This is still a problem today, where what's being taught in schools and what academics are praising and what's getting published in noteworthy magazines, popular literary magazines like The New Yorker or Plowshares, are shaping the way people view poetry. The gatekeepers are saying, hey, this is what poetry is, this is the good stuff, and people are looking at it and determining what they think about poetry based on those things. Is it always fair? Obviously, maybe not, because it doesn't always reflect or interact, and throughout history it very much has not always reflected or interacted with the second level, which is where poetry actually came from. The intimate level, the communities, the fans, the other poets. You go into your local coffee shop and read, and there's a favorite person who everyone adores. People who are sharing Instapoets poetry all over the internet because they adore it so much. These are the small communities. Back when poetry was just shared through word of mouth, these are the communities that made it popular. Someone being asked to be the bard and recite their poetry again and again is what determined whether or not someone's poetry was good. The popularity of the fans helped keep it going. The popularity in the community helped keep it going. The love other poets had for one another's work was what helped perpetuate, what lived on. Both of these levels are determined by a third level that I think we don't talk about nearly as much when it comes to gatekeeping in the poetry community and in many communities, in the literary community at large. And that's the access to those spaces. That comes in a couple of different ways. That can come in having money to submit your work to those literary magazines, to even get the work in front of the editor that could then publish it. Some of them require you to pay. Not everyone has money. Not everyone has $3 they can throw away, but not everyone has $25 that they can throw away in the hope that maybe someone might look at their work and love it, and maybe might pay them a small amount back for it if they happen to win the first prize. That also comes from money to get into universities, to make connections with those professors who might someday be teaching your poetry or who might introduce you to more connections. It can also be location. Do you not have a coffee shop within a reasonable, accessible distance to you that does poetry readings? Do you not live in an area where you have a tight poetry community? Do you have to go quite a bit out of your way to find any kind of community at all for yourself? Do you, when you get to those readings, maybe only get a 15-minute spot, or maybe even you only get to read one poem at a time, so you don't really get to build up the appreciation when you can only come every so often? Maybe you can't get away from your job to go very often to any kind of event. Maybe you have social anxiety and standing up on a stage and performing is not something you can do. Standing up and performing, being able to be a performer, is how a lot of poets get found. Poetry, like I said, originally came from a spoken word form. Spoken word poetry is very popular, and within the spoken word community, people who perform better, whether or not their line level poetry is better, will often be more popular because the performance aspect is very strong. Now, if you're someone who just can't act, isn't comfortable being on a stage, but also doesn't have the money or the proximity to somewhere to be part of these spaces, being popular within the community is a gate you can't really get past. The introduction of the internet has really taken down some of those gates. People who are really good at like graphic design, or who are more comfortable talking in front of just a camera, or who really like engaging with other strangers on the internet but don't really have access to being part of those spaces, now have a new platform where they can go and they can interact and get their poetry seen and noticed and create all these things that were once completely beyond what they would have been able to access before. There's also poetry you can read now online. You can learn about poetry. There's a lot more avenues that you don't have to spend huge amounts of money. Now, that being said, not everybody has internet, or not everybody has reliable internet, or not everybody is as good at interacting on certain platforms where communities like poets are more active, such as Twitter or Instagram. If Twitter and Instagram both make you uncomfortable, what space is there for you online? And let's just talk about the fact that some people are good at all of these things. Some people have been to college, they have a great community, they're happy to get up on stage, they're friends with all of their professors, they're friends with all of the literary journal editors, they have tons of community fans, they have tons of community support, they go to all of the open mic nights. Some people can do it all. So they have great Instagrams for poetry. There are people who are just thriving in all of the communities. And there are people who cannot access or don't feel comfortable accessing any of them, whose actual written poetry is better. And you might say the person who has access to all of these things and all of these avenues and all these people to bounce it around off of, their poetry might be better. Absolutely. They might have great poetry because they have all of these extra outlets, extra perspectives bouncing back and forth. They're probably writing pretty good poetry if they're keeping up with all of these things and also internalizing all of the feedback they get back. Absolutely. But what about the person who just spends all their time just trying to perfect their craft, just trying to make their poem as good as it can possibly be, that's the only place that they can put their energy, and they're putting all of it towards that to create this just absolutely beautiful masterpiece. But who's getting read? And who is getting talked about and who is getting shared? And it is always and is definitely the first person. And the second person, I mean, we talk about someone like Emily Dickinson, but how many people's families didn't publish their poetry after they died? How many people's families didn't know that they wrote poetry and never will know that they wrote poetry and will never share it? And how many people are sitting and struggling in one little corner of the internet trying to find friends and trying to find people, but they're really not comfortable branching out into other places, or who feel like they can't branch out into other places because of the community cliques within those places make it really hard to get into. Like, it is hard to just make friends on Twitter. You have to have a certain kind of personality and get into certain hashtags and get into certain cliques and really engage in order to actually make significant friends. Finding critique partners online. Some people have a really easy time and some people find it very difficult. And when at every single level of being an artist and being a poet and being a writer in general, there is some kind of a gate that you have to have the key to, or else find a way around, it becomes discouraging. It becomes really frustrating. And watching these people who seem to have it all and do it all can be really discouraging for a lot of people. And yes, the internet has changed the access, and yes, sometimes someone can be really innovative and come up with a totally new way of bringing the accessibility to themselves and bringing the audience into themselves rather than trying to fit themselves between the bars to get through these gates that they're never going to. And I don't have easy answers about how we fix this or anything either. There aren't easy answers for that kind of thing. This is something that's been going on forever. And there are so many different communities and different perspectives and different avenues for sharing your work and for sharing other people's work and for just loving poetry in general. It's not like opening all of the doors and letting everyone in is the solution either. And it's not like fewer gates would be the solution either. The idea I'm trying to bring up is just that if you're frustrated about gatekeeping the community, it's completely valid. And it's coming from a lot of different places. And one of the best things you can do is try to focus on one niche where you're comfortable, build up your comfort level there, make something that feels really organic to you and feels really safe and constructive and creative, and work your way out from there. If maybe Instagram and Twitter aren't really your strong points, maybe build a YouTube channel and start talking about poetry there. Maybe TikTok is your way to go. I'm sure poetry TikTok could be a real thing. It might be a real thing. I'm not on TikTok, so I don't know. I'm elderly, you guys, despite the cute way I'm dressing right now. When I was in high school, Instagram didn't exist. Instapoets like Ruby Carr could not have happened at that time. Now, that is a viable way of becoming a best-selling poet. Like, there are always different avenues opening up, always different ways, and the accessibility is so important, and bringing poetry to smaller communities is something that we could be working harder at. We could be trying to do more. Creating our own communities where we live can be something really valuable in a lot of cases, and it can also be something fully impossible for some people. Like, you could live so remotely, you could not be allowed to go somewhere. Like, a lot of poets trying to find their community are young, and so if you can't drive yet, or you're not allowed to take the car, or you're not allowed to go out late, or you're not allowed this or that, or you can't be on the internet after a certain amount of time, it is hard. And like, don't get discouraged. The value of your poetry is not in how many gates you get past. The value of your poetry is really what you get out of it and what you can share with the rest of the community. The love for poetry is the most important thing. I just wanted to generally talk about that today. I'd love to know other people's thoughts and opinions, especially if you have been shut out of one of the gates. There's also, I think I really didn't even touch on the fact that racism and sexism deeply play a part in whether or not people are reading and enjoying your poetry. We could go into a whole conversation about just that aspect. I'd love to see more thoughts. Please comment down below. Like and subscribe if you like this kind of content, and then I can know to do more in the future. Anyway, good luck to you, good luck to all of us, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye! I look like a witch with my familiar with this look. I just thought I'd go for something a little gothy and dark. This isn't my usual style, but I think I kind of like it. Especially with this hair. This is very witchy vibes. I love it.